What's something you've only seen once in real life that you don't think you'll ever see again? You'll start. Story 1. In India, I was waiting in a taxi outside a convenience store for my mum to finish her shopping, and I saw a guy come out of the store with a bottle of mango juice in his hand. He looked around to see that he wasn't being observed and then poured all the juice inside the fuel tank of a parked motorcycle nearby. He then left, cackling to himself. Story 2. While rock climbing, I saw a guy free soloing the cliff. He was about 100 feet up when he fell. He somehow spun mid-fall and grabbed a branch from the only tree growing on the cliff. The tree bent with his weight and deposited him on a ledge. He lit a cigarette and down climbed. Story 3. Saw two identical mid-80s Chevrolets park outside a 7-Eleven within a few minutes of each other. When the two owners of the cars came outside, they each went to the wrong car and spent a good 30 seconds wondering why their keys suddenly didn't work. Story 4. In Australia a few years ago, there was a dust storm that made pretty much everything outside a dark orange. The sunrise in the morning was a dark red, and I seriously considered it was the apocalypse until I saw dust-covered cars. It was apparently the worst in 70-ish years. It was a beautiful sight I may never see again. Story 5. 300,000 Europeans chanting "Tear Down the Wall" at the end of the Wall concert in Berlin 1990. Between when the wall came down and reunification, never been hugged by so many people I couldn't understand ever. Story 6. When sailing in the Mediterranean, I once saw dolphins diving in our bow wave. Dolphins in the Med aren't that special, and surfing bow waves isn't really exotic behavior for dolphins. But this was at night while we had really intense marine phosphorescence. I was on the foredeck to check our jib and then saw this pair of dolphins glowing and sparkling in a green light trailing phosphorus traces through the black water. The sight was so kitschy and looked so fake that if I had been presented with it in a movie I would have laughed at the ridiculously bad CGI. Story 7. Back in March 2010, I took a mountain hike with my grandfather to look at a volcanic eruption up close. The trek was long and hard. It was cold, something like -10 Celsius, and dangerous if you didn't watch your step, but I finally got up there, and lo and behold, I saw a lava fall. Yeah, that's like a waterfall, except it's lava. It was beyond glorious. And don't even get me started on the red pillars of magma that the volcano farted out some 100 or 200 meters upwards pretty much constantly. It was completely indescribable. About a month afterwards, that same volcano returned to up air traffic in Europe and annoy reporters worldwide. Story 8. A few years ago when I was in high school, we used to play ninja tag out in the woods at night. On this particular night, the fireflies had started to spawn. There were millions of them. The entire woods looked exactly like the scene from Avatar. I live in Michigan, so it was kind of uncommon to see so many fireflies. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. TLDR, the firefly scene from Avatar IRL. Edit. Ninja tag is basically just you run around when it's pitch black, and there are airsoft guns for the people that aren't the ninjas, and you try to get them without getting shot. It's basically just exactly what it sounds like. Try to be sneaky. Story 9. A puppy being run over at 40 miles an hour. The car didn't stop. The owner, my neighbor, came out and stood in the middle of the street screaming, "This was my baby. This was my baby," while bawling her eyes out. I've seen humans die, and I gotta say this was definitely more traumatic. Edit. The people I saw pass away were in a hospital, and code blues were called. I guess if I saw them get smashed into by cars, I'd be much more traumatized. But geez, oh man, when the family comes in after the patient's passed, sadness doesn't even begin to describe it. Story 10. My friend was grabbing a CD case from a table. He drops the case, and it lands on its side, and remains upright. To this day I still can't believe it happened. Story 11. Two miniature dachshunds chasing emus, yes, more than one, all over the fields and finally cornering them and causing one to jump over a 5-foot fence in terror. Was hard to stop laughing long enough to call the dogs off. Story 12. Worked at a land center a few years back. It was in a shopping strip area near a large intersection. While outside getting a soda from one of the machines, I heard a loud screech and smash, and I turned back. There was a white smaller passenger vehicle, small 4-door mid-90s Chevy, popping out from underneath a lifted Dodge Ram. The car had hit the Ram, found out later, at something around 100 to 110 miles per hour. The Ram was slowing down for the red light. After the car hit the rear of the truck, they both slid forward, causing the Dodge to hit a car in front of it, and letting the small white car pop out from underneath and rear-end another car in a different lane. After those hits, a couple of the cars did a domino kind of thing and caused like 9 cars in 3 lanes to be involved. I immediately ran to help. Starting formed the crosswalk light area. First car fine, barely touched his bumper. Second car, a bit shaken up, but the driver was alright. Third car, the one that was hit by the white Chevy after it came out from under the Dodge. The driver had already gotten out to see if the person in the white Chevy was alright. He was walking back to his vehicle with a face as pale as a ghost. Fourth car, white Chevy. Cause of entire accident. The top had sheared off as it hit the Dodge. The driver's seat was shoved back into recline, and the body was in the seat without a head. From what I could make, my guess was most of the head was the blood and hair and parts in the rear of the vehicle, but I'm pretty sure some of it was still under the Dodge Ram. Another man that arrived to assist and myself made sure no one came near that vehicle until EMS arrived. The Dodge Ram buckled under the impact, and the passenger had to be taken to the hospital for back pain. I've seen videos of people decapitated, but this was pretty crazy different. Don't think you'll see something like that again. At least I hope not. Also, it turns out they believe the driver of the white Chevy was a man in his late 50s. Possible stroke or ailment that caused lack of consciousness and passed out on the gas pedal. TLDR, decapitated body and cheap soda machines. Story 13. I was driving down a 5-lane road on my way to work, 2 lanes in either direction and a turning lane. I turned a bend in the road and saw 2 cars in the turning lane that had hit each other, possibly seconds before I showed up. People were running away from both of the cars to either side of the road. There was a lot of smoke coming out of one. 30 seconds later one of them exploded. Only time I've ever seen a car explode in real life, and I was a few hundred feet away. Story 14. Only a few nights ago, the most brilliant meteor ever passed over the San Francisco Bay Area, and my roommate and I were out on our backyard. This wasn't a shooting star, it was a giant glowing fireball way brighter than the full moon, and it cast shadows in our yard as it passed overhead. Story 15. In college, I saw a stripper on the chest of a guy heading off to a rock. Both mutually agreed to it. Happened in front of about 30 people, including his girlfriend, who started crying seconds afterwards. We all cheered. Go University of Wisconsin. Edit. We were all shit-faced. If that helps for anyone that doesn't understand how this could happen. Story 16. When I was a kid, the family and I went on a holiday to Africa. While sitting on the roof of the Land Rover we saw a leopard kill an antelope. I don't think you'll ever see something so majestic and peaceful again. The leopard grabbed the antelope by the throat and it seemed to accept that it was its time. No blood, and hardly a struggle. Amazing. Story 17. Okay, so I saw this rat in my house, so I grabbed a broom, began to chase. It started running towards my front door, and I thought, awesome, this is going to be easy. At the last second it made a sharp turn and bolted up my stairs. However, when the rat made this sharp turn something happened. It gave birth to 2 rats. I stopped in my tracks and was absolutely dumbfounded as to what I should next. I am willing to bet I never see that again. Story 18. I've seen my best friend, her mom, her maternal grandma, and her maternal great-grandmother conversing in the same room. Definitely not as dramatic as some of the other comments on here, but I highly doubt I'll see something like this again, considering how direct the line was. As for strange, I saw a woman reading a book on the back of a motorcycle once. Pages flopping everywhere. Story 19. A couple of decades ago, I saw the head of security of a large casino engaged in a rather vicious food fight with 9 drifter kids. In the casino buffet, I was one of the drifter kids. Story 20. Rolling out a joint at college with a couple friends. Suddenly I realize I have no paper. A friend of mine realizes too, so he gets his rolling paper out to hand me one. As he opens the paper box, the first rolling paper flies because of a slight breeze strike to my hand. It was magical. Story 21. For my wife, Sai, I saw a freaking royal flush in Texas Hold'em poker. The chances of seeing this is 0.000154, or about 649,739. We all went mental when it appeared. We were playing in a bar, and literally everyone there came to see what was going on, and those who knew reacted too, found the proof. Story 22. A stark naked man run past a library full of people at top speed. I was the only one who noticed and thus, the only one laughing, also the wall live, and being on the film set of Star Wars. Story 23. Sick apocalypse several years back. I know it happens every 17 years, but my parents said this was the worst they'd ever seen in their 50 years of life. My friends and I treated it like the zombie apocalypse. We planned when we went outside, from our route through the hordes to our plan of attack for getting them off of doors. We used to carry airsoft guns, and stand in front of cars covered in them, spraying them with electric airsoft fire and cackling like mad men. When the batteries had drained and the CO2 cartridges had emptied, we paused, guns still, smoking, and observed the carnage we had created. Exhausted, we stumbled indoors to drown the horrors we had witnessed in Capri Sun. We were not but mere boys, we were warriors. Story 24. Super tough bald guy at a transsexual club dancing on stage, lowering his pants to reveal he had a coming out of it. I was 16, after seeing all these Buck Angel replies, I went to Google to look, and yeah, I'm pretty sure it's him. Story 25. When I was around 10 or 11, my mum and I had gone out for a walk one evening after a snowfall in Manchester. The clouds had gone and the moon was full and shining very brightly. Our path took us alongside a golf course. As we passed a large open part of it, we noticed 2 foxes playing and wrestling with each other in the fresh snow, under the bright moonlight. It was a beautiful scene that will stick with me forever. Story 26. Not 5 minutes after I got kicked out of swim practice due to a thunderstorm, I got to see one of the lampposts by the pool get struck by lightning. Everyone changing in the locker rooms thought it was a gunshot. Story 27. While vacationing in Cancun, I saw a woman lose 2.5 fingers when she stuck her hand in a tiger cage. The cage looked like a jail cell with chicken wire up to about chin level, to keep little ones from becoming snacks. Apparently, she was too drunk to notice the 1 hands off signs, 2 chicken wire, and 3 people screaming not to touch the freaking tiger. I still remember being so shocked that anyone would do anything that mind-numbingly stupid that I completely froze up. Worst part about the whole thing was the crunch of the tiger's jaws and the chick's finger bones, followed by about 5 seconds of complete dead silence as people processed what had happened. It took 3 guys to get her away from the cage: her husband, my dad's best friend since high school, and the caretaker that had just spent 5 minutes telling her not to get too close. We saw the same lady at the airport on our way home, and her hand was wrapped from what's left of her fingers to her elbow. She looked high as a kite, so at least they had her on some of the good stuff, though it could have been a mix of alcoholism and recent severe blood loss. Edit misspelled lose at 4 in the morning. Apparently I need to learn the difference. Story 28. Two hot college girls making out and finger blasting each other in between the first and second set of doors to the dorm hall glass doors. It was about 1 a.m. and I was drunkenly walking back to my own dorm hall. I did a double take. I was like, wait, this happens in real life. And yes, I stood and watched for a few minutes. Story 29. Not sure if they may be common in parts of the world, but for me a sun halo, pretty sure I'll never see one again, but I did manage to take a picture. Story 30. Fell 30 feet down between a mountain and a glacier, saw the underside of melted back glacier that probably nobody had ever seen, looked down into the abyss below, climbed back out. Edit people want the story, so hey race a little more. I was with a group of 13 to 14-year-olds. I was the camp counselor. There was another counselor with us. It was a slow incline up a glacier that was over a lake. We were there as July, so it was fun to play in snow, but eventually we got bored and climbed the glacier. I wasn't planning on going to the top, but I got in a zone and started just busting up there, made it before everyone else by a long time. I looked at the crack between the mountainside and the glacier. It was about 6 feet wide. The gap was melting back. I thought to myself, better not let the kids get this close to the top. It is dangerous and they could fall or something. Before I ran down to stop them, I decided to take a small sit break as they were still only halfway up the side of the glacier. I sat facing the lake, on top of a glacier in the Olympic Mountains in Washington State. The blue sky went on forever, and the lake below reflected the glory of the heavens above. I had Neve crack the spot I was sitting on fell out beneath me. I spun and smacked the mountainside with my palm and forearm so my face didn't get punched with a mountain. Then I landed. All this happened without thinking or time to even be aware of what was going on a small outcropping cliff jutting from the mountainside. I stood up and checked my head, my face, my bones. I was okay, landed in a perfect breakfall, started yelling like crazy for the other counselor to make sure the kids stayed way back. Eventually he came and looked down. It was a bit of a no moment to say the least, but we both had our priorities straight, so he went back to the kids and made sure everyone was way far back. He didn't tell them I fell, but came back for a sec and asked how I was going to get out. By this time I had run through several scenarios involving helicopters and rescue teams. That all sounded really embarrassing, so I started looking for handholds and other little outcroppings. It was calm and peaceful, it was quiet and beautiful, everything glowed blue. Beneath me was a dark blue crack into an ancient cave of ice dragons. Or at least a gaping chasm of death that surely should have left me trapped hundreds of feet below the ice with my bones broken and my brain leaking out. That kind of motivation is really great for climbing mountainsides. So I climbed out. It was pretty scary, but I didn't realize it was scary until after I was out and safe. I guess if I had panicked, I would still be down there, just chillin', being a dead popsicle. Story 31. I watched a man die in a waiting room at a family physician's office. He collapsed after returning from the bathroom. The physician kept saying no why. As she was unable to resuscitate him, I was there for a nasal allergy spray refill. Story 32. My family was driving back from vacation in South Carolina. While on the highway I hear my dad say holy. I look up and there is a car in the air. It was going the opposite direction and drifted too close to the median. It went down the small hill in the median, hit the guardrail in between the two roads, and did 2 flips in the air. Well, technically barrel rolls. It landed on our lane, the closest to the median, unmarked. Everyone was okay and there wasn't even a scratch on the car. Story 33. More of a hoping he'll never see again, a drunk shooting his buddy at point blank and a thug beating more of hammering the guy with a wrench of some sort, a lifeless person on the side of a busy road. This happened all in one night, on the lighter side or space sticks. Story 34. That's disgusting. I saw a tire come loose off a big trailer going down I-90 over Snoqualmie Pass. They were traveling 70 miles per hour, so the tire flew probably 30 to 40 feet in the air hauling, and the sparks coming off the axle was unimaginable. Story 35. 4 magpies are in my next-door neighbor's garden. In a close-knit square, seemingly having a social occasion of some kind, eating a few breadcrumbs. Was strange. It got stranger, as 2 seagulls suddenly landed in between them. Then an awkward silence ensues for a few seconds, and suddenly one of the seagulls moves slightly, and the magpies flip there, and start squawking some incredible battle cry of a squawk beating the ever-loving out of the seagulls. The fight lasted like 3 minutes and the seagulls flew away. The magpies then returned to their square. Needless to say, I was revising and bored in the upstairs bedroom of my house, and this made my day in Rev Zion worth it. Doubt I'll see that again. Should've filmed it. TLDR. Watched some magpies beat the out of some seagulls. Story 36. In the Peace Corps I saw 2 donkeys fighting. They both had the other's tail in their mouth and were biting pretty hard, while growling at each other. This circle standoff lasted well over 5 minutes. I remember thinking Africa. Story 37. I was in the back of my dad's car going along the motorway about 3 car lengths behind and 1 lane over from a Land Rover towing a van. A sort of kebab van or a burger van, you know the type, when the van started fishtailing side to side so much that it swung 90 degrees around, so it was traveling horizontally down the road. Obviously it couldn't do this for more than a split second, so it flipped and rolled, taking the Land Rover with it rolling. They both eventually stop after about 4 or 5 rolls, and my dad pulled onto the hard shoulder and told me and brother, I was about 10 and he about 8 at the time, to stay in the car as he went over to help. He came back a few minutes later slightly shook but relieved because nobody had been injured somehow. He said a 15-year-old kid was crying from the shock, but that was the worst of it. He also mentioned that running up to car was scary because he didn't know what he was about to see. Story 38. Sitting in my university computing lab next to a window with a large bee flying into the window again and again. Suddenly out the corner of my eye a hawker similar looking swoops in and grabs the bee on the window ledge, eating it while sitting there. Probably not that spectacular but not something I see every day. Story 39. I was walking down the road. At the crest of a hill, a big mean dog came charging at me from the driveway on the other side of the road. Just as he got to the end of the driveway a car crested the hill and ran him over, saving me from dog attack. I've told that story on the internet a few times but not in real life. It just sounds too good to be true. I'm sure you'll never see that again. Story 40. I have several. First, the things I hope to never see again. My brother's best friend shot himself in the face with a shotgun and I found him like that, still alive, but no face. To see that gore in person and smell it was just awful. In New York, a man threw himself in front of the subway 20 feet from me. He screamed before impact. My uncle having a seizure, and no one in my family would help me stop him from beating his head into rough concrete because he has hepatitis. Them looking on, disgusted at him, haunts me. Then there's something that I thought I would never see again, but for some reason see every year. I was driving across town one day, and our town is separated by a river. It was autumn, but still very warm out at night. As I drove over the bridge, there was a massive swarm of moths. At first though, it appeared to be a sudden heavy snowstorm. I became so frightened by this, not knowing it was just moths, that I prayed, despite not being religious. I thought it was the end of the world. I had never seen so many bugs like that, but now I see the same thing every year at night, only for one night at a time. Story 41. I was at a party and decided to shotgun beers, which was extra intelligent considering we were on a deck which was above another deck. Said beers obviously leaked through and dripped on another party that was going on below us. A weird baby shower that was mixed gender apparently. Some strange types, more on this later. The dudes at second party started yelling, but as I am the master appeaser and ambassador of all things when I am shit-faced, I immediately shared copious jello shots with them and they became our fast friends. I proceeded to bounce back and forth between both parties throughout the night. I met a dude named Robbie who was huge and I decided he would be my new best friend. Towards the end of the night I went down to the second party to smoke a cigarette with Robbie, and was in the midst of a compelling conversation about God knows what when out of the corner of my eye I see something strange. Robbie and I were standing outside of a little circle of hammered women who were sitting out on the deck. A larger woman had lowered her shirt and whipped out her. So there are big and then there are sort of long. This was a long, it possessed girth, but more so it possessed length. It slapped into the palm of her hand and she used the other hand to tweak the nipple, not sure of her exact technique, and milk squirted out at an unbelievable velocity. This gross hero proceeds then squirted a beer can that was resting on the railing of the deck until she hit it. The beer can didn't fall, which would have been more awesome, but moved slightly. All the while Robbie and I are staring mouths agape. Words failed me then, and I've told so many people this story, and only half truly believe me, but I saw a woman squirt breast milk out of her and hit a beer can with it. TDLR at a party I saw a large shit-faced woman whip out her and hit a beer can with her breast milk. Yep. Story 42 was on safari in South Africa Kruger when the tracker spotted a lion stalking a wildebeest. Then suddenly it was two lions. Then they both attacked, caught and took the thing down. We saw it all, stalk, chase, kill. It was absolutely awesome. Also saw a mother cheetah with 5 cubs. Probably never see that again as that many cubs rarely last long. Also the birth of a child I'm not a parent will never be, but I had a friend that was so close who's ran out on her when she got pregnant and she asked me to be with her in the delivery room. Not likely you'll ever witness that again IRL. Story 43. For this to be relevant you need to know I'm interested in aircrafts. One ordinary afternoon last summer I heard a very familiar noise outside the window. I knew I'd heard it numerous times before at various air shows and thought no it can't be. Full of excitement I ran outside to discover that I actually heard right overhead a World War II Spitfire pass by like nothing. I was amazed. Quite special indeed to see something that rare totally unprepared at a totally unexpected occasion. To give some perspective there are only 2 Spitfires flying in Sweden and none is based at any airfield nearby me. Story 44 took the number 55 bus from East London to Central London one day only to find 2 black albino men sitting far apart from each other. Within minutes 2 more got on, again not acknowledging any of the others. There were under 10 people on the bus in total. Must have been a super niche convention happening in Central London. Story 45 long-time lurker, first-time poster. A couple years back my friends and I got very high and were just hanging out, shooting the breeze. One friend was sitting in an armchair and across the room another friend sat on a couch with a big OL bag of tasty as red skins. You know what I'm talking about. Anyway, armchair friend looks up in a red-eyed haze to couch friend and manages to grunt, "Hey there guy, chuck me some of them, they're delicious red skins." Couch friend immediately takes him up on this and with no intention of getting the sweet treat to armchair friend in a polite fashion, biffs the godly candy snack with reasonable vigor across the room. Being high, armchair friend doesn't have any time to react, and we all watch as the red skin makes a beeline for him. It follows a graceful arc through the air and lands right in between armchair friend's index and middle fingers, like a delicious ninja star. There's a 2-second silence which felt like an age, and then the room exploded. Everyone was screaming and running away, jumping on the furniture, howling at the ceiling. Armchair friend was completely paralyzed. screaming at the top of his lungs. The look of terrified exultation in his face said it all. He didn't move for a good 10 minutes, and then he ate the out of his well-earned prize. Whenever I'm down, I think back on that moment and remember life is good. Story 46. I was in the jungle of Borneo and was looking for orangutans. I heard a noise and upon turning around I noticed a troop of proboscis monkeys a few meters away. As they began honking rather loudly, one of them gave birth. Crazy, let me tell you. This was the day after macaque pissed on me, so equally as weird. Story 47. A month or so back, me and a couple of friends were out taking a walk at a golf course in the middle of the night. The sky was completely clear, and the full moon was up. The entire golf course was covered in thick fog, to the point where if we turned off our flashlight we couldn't see each other if we were more than 15 feet apart. While walking up a hill, we at some point turned around and saw something amazing. It was a rainbow in the middle of the night, in this foggy deserted golf course, cast by the moon. It was amazing. Story 48. I was working in the personal residence of a sitting president of the United States. Normally every minute I was in the house I was shadowed by a Secret Service officer. This time I had told him I was going to the kitchen to find some sugar. He didn't bother to follow me. I rummaged through the kitchen cabinets. They contained the kind of stuff we all have in our kitchen cabinets, except for one cabinet. That cabinet had a stack of napkins. The napkins were embossed in gold with the presidential seal. Story 49. Not me, but my mother said she was driving behind a car once crossing the intersection, then all of a sudden this motorcycle crossing the other way of the intersection hits the car in front of her doing about 50 to 60 miles per hour, causing the motorcyclist to do a double front flip over the car and land on his feet. She said it took a second for him to process what happened, but then he started to jump for joy, thankful to be alive. It's still early, so forgive me if my grammar is off. Story 50. A few of these just from the sports I love. My buddy's front tire about one from my head on a split motocross jump. I took the 100-foot tabletop. He took the 130-foot side lane and nearly landed on my head. We were both trying to get to the inside line on the landing. Bad riding on my part and an awesome save on his. He passed away a few months ago after an accident without a helmet, just warming up his bike, from what I heard. Actually, I'm 2 down after writing that to post more. Wear your damned helmets. Story 51. Me and a few friends were standing in my driveway talking to a girl in her car. Said girl flickered cigarette but out the window and it landed vertically. It wasn't propped against something. It just stood there. Blew my mind. Story 52. A big ball of lightning and its impact point, about 4 meters in front of me during a rainstorm under a plastic sheet roof. 'Twas truly a near-death experience. Story 53. I saw a white man and a black man get into a physical altercation over whether or not Ice-T is racist. The white man posited very decidedly that he isn't. Black man did not agree. A minute later, another man is banging on the bathroom door. This is all at a Jack-in-the-Box restaurant and trying to get a response out of his buddy. 3 minutes later, the manager kicks everyone out because they're closing early. I hope that's as close to an OD as I have to get. Story 54. I was playing Monopoly with a friend and my sister about 10 years ago. My friend rolled the dice and it jumped up off the table, onto the fruit bowl on the table and spun all the way around the edge, then jumped back onto the table. Was amazing. Story 55. I once chased a guy away from a party with a fence post that was going crazy, threatening people with knives. The police arrived shortly after. Everyone was like, he went that way. The police officer put the car in reverse and put the handbrake on to 180 the car and screech off in the other direction. Story 56. So it was 4 a.m., and naturally we were saran wrapping a passed out friend to his bed. After running out the roll we decided to drive up to a 24-hour Kmart for more. As we walk up to the automatic doors a man comes flying out, trips in the vestibule and drops some electronics out of his coat. He gets up and darts past us, his coat still full of stolen merchandise. As this happens, a nerdy-looking clerk who was chasing him reaches the parking lot and lets out a pretty angry man roar and then walks back into the store awkwardly. This is the reason I still shop at 4 a.m. Story 57. When I saw Firefly for the first time, it was shortly before the release of Serenity. To celebrate this, a local cinema ran the entire series on the big screen in one marathon session, with a 20-minute preview of the movie afterwards. It took almost 16 hours. The theater reeked of human. Didn't speak to me for almost a week, but it was so shiny. After the first couple of episodes the entire theater went arg along with the mutant enemy zombie. And the kicker, after we saw the last episode, they announced that as a special treat to all those who made it this far, they were going to show the entire movie, not just a preview. Like 2 weeks before release, TLDR browncoats got asses of steel. Story 58. While driving between 2 cities in an uninhabited part of far eastern Oregon high desert at night, me, my mom, my grandma, and a family friend witnessed a huge lime green, glowing orb drift slowly through the sky over our car and disappear behind some hills. I have no idea what it was. My mom thinks it was a UFO, but I try not to jump to conclusions. Haven't seen anything like it since and doubt I ever will again. Story 59. The people at CERN moving one of the giant Atlas end-cap toroids on a huge platform through the streets of CERN. It was one of the liquid helium supercooled toroidal electromagnets that gets put at one end of the Atlas experiment at the Large Hadron Collider. This was back in the summer of 2007, when they were still constructing things. Hey, race a picture of what that looked like. I suppose it's not as awesome as moving a space shuttle through LA, but I saw this one live and it won't happen again. although, it's possible it'll see something similar if we build another giant particle collider in 40 years. Story 60. I once witnessed a hawk swoop down to a squirrel of the road only to be hit by a truck. Feathers exploded in the air, the truck passed over the squirrel and it ran off into the woods. Story 61. My mother bled to death in front of me, throwing up blood on the way to the hospital while I was driving. The look of fear in her eyes is something I'll never forget. Story 62. A duck flew into the power lines down my driveway once. Managed to touch 2 lines at the same time. Instantly fried, big green flash of light and loud thunderous bang noise. Power went out and the power lines had fallen across our driveway. Story 63. I watched a ramp demolition derby where before the race had even started a car had flipped the pit lane fence. That was awesome. Another was seeing the snow in Ohakun, New Zealand, when we stayed there. That place had special meaning. It's where we took our exchange student the last time we saw him. He committed suicide a year later. Seeing the snow there was amazing. It was brilliant, amazing. Can provide photos if wanted. Edit. Having orca swim under the ship I was voyaging on. Captain said in 20 years it had never happened. Orca next to the boat. No zoom. Edit. 2 snow and more snow. Story 64. I was at a shopping mall in Bangkok and I was in the line for the metal detector. Standing next to me was a ginger man with freckles. Except he was also a Sikh with a beard and turban. His family members were also there and they were much more Indian looking. I didn't know if he was adopted or what. To this day, I know I'll never see him again. Story 65. I saw, Planet Earth style, one of those 12-foot manta rays jump full body out of the water and splash back and not 50 yards away from me while I was in the ocean. I saw it do it twice that day. I will not see that again.